The alarm pierced through the quiet hum of the exploration vessel Sabyok as Jiho's fingers flew across the communication console. His coffee mug rattled against the metal surface, forgotten as streams of data cascaded down his screens. For 3 months, their deep space mission had been routine mapping star systems, cataloging planets, sending boring reports back to Earth Command. Now something had changed. "Captain Mina to the bridge," Jiho called over the intercom, his voice tight with excitement and concern. The signal he was receiving defied everything he knew about long-range communications. It was coming from beyond the mapped sectors, from a region of space marked only as unexplored on their navigation charts. Captain Mina arrived within minutes, her boots clicking against the metal deck plates. She was young for a deep space commander, but her crew trusted her completely. Earth's exploration fleet was small, and they couldn't afford to waste talent on bureaucracy. "What do you have, Jiho?" "It's unlike anything in our databases," he replied, adjusting his headset. "The signal is incredibly weak, almost lost in background radiation. But listen to this." He routed the audio through the bridge speakers. A haunting series of tones filled the air, not quite music, not quite speech, but something that made the hair on everyone's arms stand up. The sounds rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost familiar, like hearing a conversation in a language you'd never learned but somehow understood. "How far?" Mina asked, studying the display screens that showed their position relative to known space. "The Kepler 442 system. We're talking about a journey to the very edge of what our fuel reserves can handle." Jiho pulled up the navigation data. "Even if we stripped everything non-essential and pushed our engines beyond recommended limits, it would be a one-way trip." Mina frowned at the numbers. The Sabyok was designed for exploration, not rescue missions. They carried supplies for a crew of 12 for 6 months, along with scientific equipment and communication arrays. It wasn't built for heroics. "Keep analyzing the signal," she ordered. "I want to know everything we can learn before we make any decisions." Over the next 6 hours, Jiho worked with the ship's computer to decode the mysterious transmission. The breakthrough came when he realized the signal contained mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, and most importantly, the universal constants that any technological civilization would recognize. "Captain, you need to see this," Jiho called out, his voice hoarse from hours of concentration. The bridge crew gathered around his station as he played back his analysis. "The mathematics are consistent with the distress beacon," he explained, highlighting sections of the decoded data. "But there's something else. The signal is degrading rapidly, as if whatever is sending it is running out of power. And these energy readings ... double quotes." He paused, double-checking his calculations. "I think their entire star system is in trouble." Mina studied the data, her mind racing through possibilities. Every exploration vessel carried protocols for first contact situations, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this. The signal suggested a civilization advanced enough for interstellar communication, but desperate enough to broadcast blindly into space. "What about other ships?" she asked. "Surely someone closer could respond." Jiho shook his head grimly. "I've checked all known fleet positions. The nearest Confederation vessel is 3 months away, and that's assuming they drop everything and head there immediately. We're it, Captain. We're the only ones who can reach them in time." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Mina looked around at her crew, Jiho at communications, Timan monitoring the engines, Yuna calculating jump coordinates, Huyan analyzing the alien signals, technical specifications. 12 humans aboard a small exploration vessel, suddenly faced with a decision that could mean life or death for an entire alien civilization. "The signal is getting weaker," Hyun reported from the science station. "Based on the rate of degradation, I estimate we have maybe 72 hours before it cuts out entirely." Mina closed her eyes for a moment, weighing their options. Earth Command would probably order them to return and let the proper authorities handle the situation, but by then, whatever was sending the distress call would likely be dead. The mathematical sequences in the signal painted a picture of desperate beings reaching out across the void, hoping someone would hear their final plea. "All hands. This is the captain," Mina announced over the ship's intercom. "Report to the main briefing room in 10 minutes. We have a decision to make." As the crew assembled, Jiho continued monitoring the alien signal. Each pulse seemed fainter than the last, like a heartbeat slowly fading away. Somewhere, in the darkness between the stars, an unknown civilization was dying, and only 12 humans stood between them and extinction. The engineering bay of the Sabyok had never been so chaotic. Temin crawled through maintenance shafts, with a plasma torch in one hand and determination burning in his chest. Sparks showered down as he rerouted power conduits, bypassing safety systems that had kept human ships alive for decades. The jump drive hummed ominously above him, its crystalline core pulsing with dangerous energy levels. "Temin, those readings are way beyond manufacturer specs," Yuna called from the navigation console, her voice crackling through the CUM system. "The drive crystals weren't designed for this kind of stress, I know," he grunted, emerging from the shaft with grease smeared across his face. "But the manufacturer never had to save an alien civilization either." He wiped his hands on his coveralls and studied the modified jump drive assembly. 3 days of non-stop work had transformed their reliable exploration vessel into something that would make Earth engineers lose sleep. The ship's corridors buzzed with activity as the entire crew worked toward their impossible deadline. In the navigation center, Yuna surrounded herself with holographic star charts that painted the air around her in blue light. Her calculations covered every available surface, complex equations that mapped gravitational fields, stellar positions, and fuel consumption rates. The standard route to Kepler 442 would take 8 months. She explained to Captain Mina, who had arrived to check on their progress. "But if we use gravitational slingshots around these 3 binary star systems, we can cut that down to 6 weeks." She highlighted the proposed route with a gesture, and the hologram shifted to show their planned trajectory. Mina studied the path, noting how it threaded between dangerous radiation zones and unstable stellar formations. "What are the risks, honestly? We'll be flying through regions that have never been properly mapped. Any one of these systems could have hidden asteroid fields, rogue planets, or gravity anomalies that could tear us apart." Yuna's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "And that's assuming Timon's modifications don't cause the jump drive to explode." From the engine room came the sound of heavy machinery being moved. Taman had convinced the crew to strip out everything non-essential, extra sleeping quarters, recreational facilities, even most of their scientific equipment. Every gram of weight mattered when pushing their fuel reserves to the absolute limit. "We're becoming a flying fuel tank with life support," joked Hayan as he helped carry equipment to the cargo bay. But his humor couldn't hide the tension in his voice. They all knew the mathematics. This mission had maybe a 60% chance of success, and that was being optimistic. The jump drive modifications were unlike anything in standard engineering manuals. Teman had increased power output by 30%, installed additional cooling systems salvaged from their life support backups, and created bypass circuits that would make safety inspectors weep. The crystalline drive core now pulsed with an angry red light instead of its usual calm blue. "The crystals are singing," reported Jiho from his monitoring station. The harmonic resonance of the drive had changed, producing an eerie melody that echoed through the ship's hull. "I've never heard anything like it." "That's because no one has ever pushed a jump drive this hard," Taman replied, running diagnostics on his modified systems. "We're entering uncharted territory in more ways than one." The crew worked in shifts, but no one really slept. Every few hours brought new challenges as they pushed deeper into unexplored space. Their first major jump took them past the frontier colonies, beyond the safety of regular patrol routes. The stars outside their viewports became unfamiliar, and their communication array could no longer reach Earth Command. During their second week, they encountered their first real danger. Yuna's calculations had brought them close to a neutron star system, using its massive gravitational field to boost their velocity. But the stellar remnant was more active than their sensors had indicated. "Radiation spike," Haon called out as alarms blared throughout the ship. "The neutron star is emitting gamma-ray bursts," Temin's modified engines screamed as he pushed them to emergency power. The Sabiok shuddered and groaned, its hull plates expanding and contracting under the stress. Through the viewports they could see the neutron star spinning like a cosmic lighthouse, beams of deadly radiation sweeping through space. "We need more speed," Mina ordered, gripping her command chair as the ship bucked and rolled. "I'm giving you everything we have," Taman replied, his hands flying over the engine controls. The jump drive core pulsed faster, its angry red glow filling the engineering bay with hellish light. "If we push any harder, the crystals might shatter." They escaped the neutron star's influence with hull damage and strained systems, but they were still alive. More importantly, they were still on schedule. The alien distress signal continued to fade with each passing day, a constant reminder of the lives depending on their desperate journey. By the 4th week, the crew had adapted to their new reality. They lived on emergency rations, slept in shifts, and worked with equipment pushed far beyond safe limits. But something remarkable had happened during their journey. They had become more than just a crew, they had become humanity's representatives. In the darkness between stars, the Sabiok dropped out of jump space, with a violent shudder that threw everyone against their restraints. Through the main viewports, the crew stared in horror at what awaited them in the Kepler 442 system. The star that should have been a stable yellow dwarf was pulsing like a cosmic heartbeat, flaring bright white, then dimming to an ominous red glow every few minutes. "My God," whispered Yuna, her navigation instruments going crazy as gravitational waves rippled through space with each stellar pulse. "The entire system is being torn apart." Captain Mina gripped her command chair as the ship rocked under the unstable gravity fields. "Jiho, are you picking up any signals?" "Multiple sources," he replied, his voice tight with concentration. "The distress beacon is coming from the third planet, but there are also what look like automated defense platforms throughout the system. They're not responding to our hail attempts." Through the chaos of flickering starlight, they could see the Altaran homeworld, a blue-green marble that should have been beautiful but was now scarred by massive storms. Lightning danced across its surface in patterns that looked almost like neural networks firing in a dying brain. Suddenly, their communication array crackled to life with a new signal, not the mathematical sequences they had been following, but something far more complex. Kian worked frantically at his console, running the transmission through every translation protocol in their database. "It's a language," he announced with excitement, "incredibly sophisticated, but the syntax has mathematical foundations. Give me a few minutes." While Hayan worked on decoding the alien communication, Taman struggled to keep their ship stable in the chaotic gravitational field. The modified jump drive was overheating badly, and several hull plates were beginning to buckle under the stress. "Got it," Hayan suddenly exclaimed. The main speakers crackled, and then a voice unlike anything they had ever heard filled the bridge. It was musical yet mechanical, like wind chimes made of crystal being played by a computer. "Unknown vessel. You have entered a quarantine zone. Our star has become unstable due to quantum resonance cascade failure. All attempts at correction have failed. You must leave immediately or face destruction." Mina looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "Jiho, open a channel. All frequencies. Channel open. Captain, this is Captain Mina of the Earth vessel Sabiok. We received your distress signal and have traveled 6 weeks to reach you. We're here to help." The response came quickly, but the alien voice now carried notes of confusion and what might have been hope. "Earth vessel ... Your species is not in our databases. You traveled here in response to our emergency beacon. This is unprecedented. We'd like to come aboard your ship or station to discuss how we can assist." Mina replied. There was a long pause before the alien responded. "We will send a shuttle to escort you. But you must understand our greatest scientists and most advanced automated systems have failed to solve this crisis. What could your small vessel possibly accomplish?" 20 minutes later, an Altaran shuttle approached the Sabiok. It was unlike any human design, more grown than built, with organic curves that seemed to shift and flow even as they watched. The craft moved with impossible grace through the turbulent gravitational fields. The shuttle pilot was the first Altaran any human had ever seen. Tall and slender, with skin that shimmed like oil on water and large eyes that reflected the flickering starlight. The being moved with fluid motions that reminded Hayan of underwater dancers when it spoke. Its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "I am researcher Velta. Our situation is desperate. The star's quantum field has become unstable, creating resonance cascades that our technology cannot predict or control. Our automated systems were designed for perfection, but this anomaly defies all logical parameters." As Velta led them through the alien station, the humans marveled at the technology surrounding them. The corridors seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Mechanical beings that looked like artistic sculptures moved through the halls, their movements precise but somehow lifeless. "These are our maintenance constructs," Volta explained, noticing their interest. "They operate according to perfect mathematical models, but perfection has become our weakness. When the star began its irregular behavior, our systems could not adapt because the situation fell outside their programmed parameters." In the main science chamber, dozens of Altarones worked at consoles that projected three-dimensional models of their dying star. The displays showed complex equations and probability matrices, but Hayon noticed something important. Every calculation followed rigid patterns, like a beautiful but inflexible dance. "Your approach is incredibly sophisticated," Hayon said diplomatically, but it's also very systematic. What if the solution requires something less predictable? Velter's large eyes focused on him with interest. Less predictable, you mean? Random variables, but randomness leads to chaos. Our civilization eliminated such inefficiencies millennia ago. Sometimes chaos is exactly what you need, Heian replied with a smile. Humans have built our entire technological development on controlled chaos. We call it improvisation, intuition, and sometimes just plain stubbornness. The Eltaran scientists exchanged glances that humans couldn't interpret, but their body language suggested a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The Eltaran workshop buzzed with unprecedented activity as Teeman stood elbow-deep in alien technology. That should have been impossible to understand. Crystalline components the size of his fist hummed with energy while organic-looking circuits pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Around him, towering Alteran constructs moved with mechanical precision, their multiple arms weaving together delicate quantum processes. "This is insane," muttered Yuna, holding a device that looked like frozen lightning trapped in glass. According to their specifications, this single component has more processing power than our entire ship's computer system. Hyun worked frantically at a holographic interface, his hands moving through streams of data that painted the air around him in shifting colors. The Alterans have been trying to solve this with pure mathematical perfection, he explained, sweat beading on his forehead, but their star isn't following mathematical rules anymore. It's behaving more like a living thing, having a breakdown. Temin grinned as he connected a human-made power coupling to an Alteran quantum resonator using nothing but electrical tape and determination. The hybrid device sparked and hummed, its lights flickering in patterns that made nearby scientists step back in alarm. That connection should not be possible, Valter observed, his voice carrying notes of fascination and horror. The energy signatures are completely incompatible. By our calculations, that device should explode. Yeah, probably, Teeman agreed cheerfully, adjusting the coupling with a standard wrench. But it's not exploding right now, and that's what matters. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that shouldn't work. The stellar stabilizer taking shape before them was a beautiful nightmare of human improvisation and Alteran precision. Temin had gutted half their ship's secondary systems to provide the chaotic energy patterns Hyun insisted they needed, while the Alterans contributed quantum field generators that could theoretically reshape spacetime itself. The principle is sound, Heian explained to the assembled alien scientists. Your star is stuck in a feedback loop because it's trying to maintain perfect stability. But stars aren't meant to be perfectly stable. They're supposed to fluctuate, to breathe. To live, we need to introduce controlled chaos to break the loop. Jiho worked at a communication console that was now more Alteran than human, his fingers dancing across controls that responded to touch, thought, and apparently mood. "I've managed to establish a quantum communication link with the stellar core," he reported, "but the signal is incredibly unstable. It's like trying to have a conversation with someone who's having a seizure." The stabilizer device stood nearly 3 meters tall, its surface covered in a mixture of human electronics and Alteran biotechnology. Organic tubes pulsed with glowing fluid while human-made circuits sparked and hummed. At its heart, a crystalline core the size of a basketball contained enough energy to power a small city. "Deployment is going to be the real challenge," Captain Mina announced, studying the tactical displays. "We need to get this thing within 50,000 kilometers of the star's surface. That's well inside the corona, where temperatures reach millions of degrees." Velter's skin patterns shifted to what the humans had learned indicated extreme concern. "No vessel in our fleet can survive such proximity to the star in its current state. The gravitational fluctuations alone would tear apart our strongest ships." "Good thing we're not using one of your ships," Mina replied with a grin that worried everyone present. "Teeman, how much more abuse can the Sabiok take?" "Honestly, she should have fallen apart 2 weeks ago," Teeman admitted, patting the bulkhead affectionately, "but she's stubborn, like her crew. I can reinforce the hull with Alteran armor plating and upgrade our shields with their quantum field generators. We might survive long enough to deploy the device." The next 12 hours passed. In a blur of desperate preparation, the Sabiok was transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to Earth engineers. Its hull now gleamed with alien alloys, while its interior hummed with technologies that operated on principles human science was only beginning to understand. Jiho established a communication network that linked the ship, the stabilizer device, and the Alteran monitoring stations. "The quantum entanglement should maintain contact even through the stellar interference," he explained. though his voice suggested he wasn't entirely sure that as they prepared for launch, Una calculated approach vectors that would take them through the safest possible route to the star's corona, safest being a relative term when discussing a journey that would expose them to radiation levels that could kill an unprotected human in microseconds. All stations report ready, announced Jiho as the crew strapped themselves into reinforced acceleration couches. The stabilizer device was secured in their cargo bay, its exotic energies contained by force fields that flickered ominously. "Take us in," Mina ordered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. The Sabiok broke orbit from the Alteran station and began its descent toward the dying star. The ship's hull groaned under the increasing gravitational stress while its hybrid systems struggled to maintain stability. Through the viewports, they could see the star's surface roiling with plasma storms that dwarfed entire planets. 15 minutes to deployment point, Una announced, her voice tight with concentration as she fought to keep them on course through the chaotic gravitational fields. The real test was about to begin. The moment the stellar stabilizer activated, space itself seemed to hold its breath. From the bridge of the battered Sabiok, the crew watched as their impossible device sent ripples of controlled chaos into the dying star's core. The chaotic energy patterns that Hune had calculated began to break the deadly feedback loop that had been tearing the star apart. "It's working," Jiho whispered, his voice filled with awe as he monitored the quantum communication link. "The stellar resonance is shifting to a stable pattern." The star's violent pulsing began to slow, its angry red flares gradually giving way to a steady golden glow across the Alterone homeworld. The massive storms that had been ravaging the surface began to calm as the gravitational chaos subsided. Through their enhanced sensors, they could see the planet's lights beginning to come back online as millions of Alterans emerged from their emergency shelters. Valter's voice came through the communication system, but now it carried harmonics of joy that made the human crew's hearts soar. "Impossible. The quantum cascade has stabilized. The star is returning to normal parameters. You have done what our greatest minds believed could never be accomplished." Temin collapsed into his engineering chair, exhausted but grinning. The Sabiok's hybrid systems were running on backup power. Her hull was scarred and scorched, but she had survived. "Sometimes the best solution is the one that shouldn't work," he said, echoing his earlier words. Within hours, the news of humanity's intervention spread through Alteran communication networks. The story of 12 humans who had traveled impossible distances to save strangers became the most transmitted message in Alteran history. Their organic computer networks, which normally processed information with mathematical precision, now buzzed with something they had never experienced before: emotional excitement. "We must contact the Galactic Communication Networks," Velter announced during their first formal meeting after the crisis. "Your species must be recognized by the Galactic Confederation. What you have accomplished here changes everything." Captain Mina looked around at her exhausted crew. They had pushed themselves and their ship beyond all reasonable limits, but they had saved an entire civilization. "We didn't do this for recognition," she said simply. "We did it because it was the right thing to do." The Alteran skin patterns shifted to colors that conveyed deep respect. "This concept of right thing is fascinating to us. Our society has been built on efficiency and logical optimization. But you traveled across the galaxy not for profit or strategic advantage, but simply because others needed help." Over the following weeks, as the Sabiok underwent repairs using advanced Alterune technology, the crew found themselves at the center of something unprecedented. Delegations from across the galaxy began arriving in the Kepler 442 system, all wanting to meet the humans who had achieved the impossible. The first to arrive were the Xanthari insectoid beings whose hive-mind collective had been monitoring the crisis from afar. Their ship, a massive organic construct that looked like a living asteroid, docked with the Alterone station with ceremonial precision. "Your species displays remarkable individual initiative," their spokesperson buzzed through translation devices. "We have observed your willingness to risk personal safety for collective benefit. This is ... admirable." Next came the Void Dancers, energy beings who existed partly in normal space and partly in hyperspace dimensions. They appeared as shifting aurora patterns that somehow conveyed meaning through color and movement. Small flesh beings from the RIM territories, their communication translated as musical tones. "You have shown that size and age of civilization mean nothing compared to courage and creativity. The Void Dancers acknowledge your worth." But it was the arrival of the Ancient Keepers that truly signaled humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. These beings were older than most stellar civilizations, existing as pure consciousness within crystalline matrices that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. We have watched species rise and fall across the eons. Their telepathic communication felt like whispers in the crew's minds. Few demonstrate the spark of true heroism that burns within your kind. Humanity shall be remembered in the archives of eternity. Ji-ho found himself overwhelmed by the responsibility of representing his entire species. "We're just explorers," he protested during one of the many formal ceremonies. "We're not ambassadors or diplomats. "That is precisely why your actions carry such weight," replied the Alteron Council's eldest member. "You responded not as representatives of your government or following official protocols, but as individuals who chose to do good. This authenticity cannot be manufactured or programmed." The Sabiok eventually departed the Kepler 442 system, but not as the same small exploration vessel that had arrived. The Alterons had upgraded her systems with technology that would have seemed like magic just months before. Her hull now incorporated living metal that could repair itself. Her engines used quantum tunneling principles that made faster than light travel routine rather than dangerous. More importantly, humanity now had its first true ally among the stars. The Alterons established permanent diplomatic relations with Earth, sharing their advanced technology and scientific knowledge. They also served as advocates for humanity within the broader galactic community. Years later, when human colonies began spreading throughout nearby star systems, they found doors already open for them. The story of the Sabiok's crew had become legend, told in a dozen different languages across hundreds of worlds. They were remembered not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species that would risk everything to help strangers. The small act of 12 humans answering a distress call had changed the destiny of their entire species, proving that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single decision to do what's right. The end.